In this episode of Cosmic Sponge, we announce our Halloween contest winner. The U.S. Department of Cover-Ups releases a new report on UAPs. An anonymous source posts Bigfoot warnings to campers in Pennsylvania. And for our main topic, we analyze the life and predictions made by perhaps the most prominent psychic of the 20th century, Edgar Cayce. But not before Stephen takes time to phone in a radio request for yours truly.
This one goes out to my friend Jimmy.
Oh no.
Who lost all of his hair in a tragic fishing accident.
Fishing?
Oh no.
Wow.
Zoinks.
I shouldn't be fishing in that radioactive lake.
Welcome to Cosmic Sponge, the podcast where we discuss weird wonders in the world. I'm Stephen Hawk.
And I'm Jimmy Cole.
In tonight's episode, we are going to be looking at one of the most famous prophets of modern times. We're going to be looking at an individual named Edgar Cayce. If you know anything about clairvoyance and early 20th century spiritualism, I'm sure you've heard of Mr. Edgar Cayce, who has predicted many events that some say have already come true. He also has predictions for our future that are yet to come. Before we get into that, though, we need to announce our contest winner.
That's right. On November 1st, I picked the contest winner, and if you went to our website, you would be able to see at least the first couple of letters of the winner's name. They go ahead and X out the rest of it so as to not display your information to the rest of the world, and we're not going to do that either because I'm sure you don't want junk mail from all the people that listen to us, because who knows who listens to us. It might be Elon Musk. He might, maybe on a Friday night, want to just start sending out emails to people, and you might get one. So
Elon Musk.
He's on the forefront of my mind because a little ad came up on the website I'm on over here for my first news thing, a little pop-up with Elon Musk face.
The only emails he's sending out right now is if you're a Twitter employee that are saying you're fired.
That's right. He bought the Twitter. Now I can tweet. King Twit.
He's the king of the tweets.
Of the twit people.
Or something.
I don't know. We don't do that stuff yet.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe sometime. I've been thinking about doing it.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to the contest.
Yeah, you distracted me. So, yeah, the contest. So the contest winner is a Stephen B., and then I'm not going to tell you the rest of his information. But if you're Stephen B., and I've already sent you an email, you need to get in touch with me so I know where to ship your winnings.
Heck yeah. Way to go, Stephen B. And thank you so much for entering the contest, and to everyone else that entered. This is always a lot of fun, so I'm sure we'll have another contest coming up pretty soon.
Yeah, Christmas is just around the corner, so.
Just around the corner, so that sounds good. Let's plan for a Christmas giveaway. And oddly enough, I kept making fun of you about, hey, this episode, the episode will be on November 6th. Well, I've been a little late this week, but my birthday just passed and I had festivities to attend to. So this is going to be a day or two late.
Yeah, fair enough.
What have you been up to this week?
So I was sitting on the edge of my seat because the U.S. Defense Intelligence Report was supposed to be released on October the 31st, Halloween, and it was released to Congress, but not to the rest of us. However, they are going to release some version of it to the public. I don't think it's out yet. They anticipate that they're going to mostly focus on items in our skies that are airborne clutter, I think, and probably drones, foreign intelligence collecting apparatus, those kinds of things. I don't know that they're actually going to tell us about little green men. What do you think?
No, absolutely not. But I guess they were supposed to deliver this report by Monday, October 31st. Maybe they had some birthday festivities or something and didn't get theirs out on time either.
Dragging their feet.
One thing they did mention here was they're looking into the Go Fast video, the Gamble video, the very famous ones that started this thing. In this report, I think the same article, I'm reading the one off Reuters, they had mentioned that the Go Fast vehicle just zooms out. They said that they have determined that that object was only traveling at about 48, I believe, kilometers per hour, and that it was just a illusion because they moved the camera off of it. The vehicle was in the air, and then you had the water below it, and because of the angle and the jet moving at the same time gave this illusion that it was moving very, very fast.
The result of parallax, probably, right?
Exactly. And then whenever they moved of course, there's been a lot of amateur debunkers, I guess, or other UFO people that have looked into this very video and have pointed out that that's really just sort of a perspective of looking at that object that made it appear to be going very fast, but could even have been stationary, just a balloon floating there. But it was the altitude combined with the speed of the jet is what made it look so fast. So, but anyway, their analysis, and that's just one thing they released to say that their analysis shows that it was going about 48 miles an hour. They still don't know what it was.
Right. Are they going to change the video from go fast to go slow?
Yeah, maybe. Go not so fast. This kind of coincides with an article from the New York Times. They have discussed, that they're hearing from before this report's released, is that a lot of the UFOs or UAPs are Chinese drones doing some surveillance on the United States and just general airborne clutter with domestic drones too. So that's what they attribute a lot of it to. And weather balloons, I just thought I'd let you know the weather balloons also made the list because I know how much you love those things.
Of course they made the list.
Yeah, of course they made the list.
Where do they manufacture those Chinese drones?
Well, the funny thing is that even the domestic drones are Chinese drones. At least they were made in China.
Yeah, they probably have software inside of domestic drones that just pipe the information back to China.
Hey, there's been talk about that kind of stuff. So who knows? Maybe. I know that their most popular, what is it? DJ? What is it? You probably know. You've been looking at drones lately.
Yeah.
Yeah, DJI. They are a company that the Chinese military uses, and that's the number one drone sold in the United States, too. So who knows? Let's get your paranoia going out there.
Yeah, I mean, I worry about it because I know the Chinese have those manufacturing capabilities. I know it's gone down a little bit with COVID and the global crash in manufacturing because of COVID. But I also know they make all of those props for clowns and stuff like that. Like, those big clown hands that smack you on the spring. I can just envision those guys being clever enough to come up with this idea where they attach that to a drone and they just fly them around and smack people in the face. And they can attach guns. They can attach bombs. Why can't they attach the clown smacking hand?
Yeah, this goes back to the Robertson report. Think about it.
Yeah.
The Robertson report back in the 50s said that America was becoming hysterical over UFOs and it could leave us vulnerable to attack, right? The Pentagon and,
Yeah.
Well, here you go. The Chinese, all these drones are deployed, and then suddenly a giant hand comes at them and starts smacking citizens all around the country. Well, see, the country would become destabilized. Would leave us vulnerable to attack because of the hand smacking from the drones.
I don't want to get smacked.
I could see it.
I'm already on edge. I'm having a panic attack over here.
The big hands conspiracy is what we'll call it.
Big hand smacking conspiracy of 2022.
Yeah.
So I did have one other thing here. I don't know if you had something else on that particular topic.
Well, I just wanted to add that, of course, the military, of the 144 sightings, they said, quite frankly, there wasn't enough data to determine what most of them are with any kind of reasonable suspicion, but that's the word they're given. In other words, the main line from the military has not changed.
Right. And to be fair to them, if you don't have the data, I mean, you can make stuff up if you want to, but I mean, that's not what you want to do. You want to get more data.
I agree with that, but what I'm saying is their line hasn't changed since the beginning of the whole UFO phenomenon. Before all they had was weather balloons, right? They could say, oh, it was a weather balloon. But now they're saying it's weather balloons, it's Chinese drones, it's airborne clutter. It's a satellite because we have like 5,000 satellites in orbit now, right? They have even more items to say is what someone saw instead of a flying saucer now.
I got you. Yeah. It's not just swamp gas anymore, folks.
That's right. That's exactly what I mean by that.
So, I like to camp. So there is...
Speaking of swamp gas.
Speaking of swamp gas. I'm not saying I'm the source, but if you have beans around a campfire, I'm just saying things happen. So
how about some more beans?
I think you had about enough. So mysterious Bigfoot warnings have been popping up all around parks, with campers urged not to approach. There are these signs in the Pennsylvania state parks that are signed as being put up by the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. They have responded that, in fact, these signs that have been posted everywhere throughout these parks are indeed fake. So there are people going around putting up fake signs warning people to stay away from Bigfoot.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I actually posted this on Facebook back on October 15th.
Yeah,
this very story.
Yeah.
I didn't cover it in the news, but yeah, so it does. It looks very official. It's Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Warning. Due to encounters in the area of a creature resembling, quote, Bigfoot, we are instructing all park visitors to observe elevated park etiquette, be cautious of your surroundings, and keep the location of any small children/pets within a tighter scope of awareness. Do not approach the creature. I love it. I love it. I think we have someone that has public safety in mind here. There's probably been some sightings up there, and of course, government officials are just going to scoff at it. Someone's going out there performing a service to their community by posting these Bigfoot warnings. I mean, I think it's very sound advice. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's great. And not only did they post this in English, they also, below the English section, posted it in Spanish.
Really nice. So it's nice touch. Nice to
international.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. I think it's probably time to move on to tonight's main topic. But before we get into that, I would like to remind everyone to please rate and review the podcast. It helps other people find the show. You can look for us on Facebook, where many of the stories we talk about are posted there, and other stories as well. We also have a group on Facebook called Cosmic Sponge Theorists. So if you'd like to get a lot of these stories in your daily feed, be sure to subscribe to that. Speaking of subscribing, make sure you are subscribed to this podcast. A lot of times we just assume that if you've downloaded it and you're listening to it, that you're subscribed. But if you came across this podcast because you were interested in ancient civilizations or ancient ice age extinctions or something like that, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget Instagram. Jimmy does a lot of work over there, which is quite humorous. And finally, go to our webpage. It's cosmicsponge.com. There you can find the web store and ways to support the show. Buy me a coffee for a one-time donation, or you can support us on Patreon and gain access to another show we do called Weird Wonders that we produce exclusively for our Patreon supporters. Contact information is firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. Jimmy, I know you've probably done a little legwork on old Edgar Cayce. Why don't you get us kicked off tonight?
The huge glowing mushroom paralyzed Ronnie Johnson and his trusty dog Snowball, along with a small flock of wide-eyed sheep. The unusual incident, one of many, contributed to the nomination of Delphos, Kansas, as a super paranormal town, pushing it to the top of the list when it came time to update the map of weird-ass places to visit. Physical traces from Ronnie Johnson's out-of-this-world encounter remained unexplained, including numbing residue on the ground, off-the-chart radioactive readings, broken and burnt trees forming a circle around the mushroom landing site, and a flock of sheep with unusual breeding habits subsequent the encounter. As bizarre as this incident was and remains, another town edged past Delphos to take the number 1 spot on the map of weird wonders. Enter Hopkinsville, Kentucky, known as Hoptown by the locals. It's a town filled with night riders, one-man armies, alien goblin attacks, and home to the most prolific psychic of all time, Mr. Edgar Cayce. Edgar began his psychic journey after meeting an angel and acquiring the ability to learn by sleeping on top of books instead of reading them. Despite these humble beginnings, Cayce would go from a failed insurance salesman to the most prolific clairvoyant of his day and possibly of all time. Tonight, we're going to look into the predictions that came true and the ones that didn't before weighing in on our thoughts about this celebrity psychic. So sit back, lay down on a book, and learn two things at once as we explore the life of the super-duper psychic, Edgar Cayce.
Not to be confused with Casey Kasem in America's Top 40.
Or Shaggy.
This one goes out to my friend Jimmy.
Oh, no.
Who lost all of his hair in a tragic fishing accident.
Fishing?
Oh, no.
Wow.
Zoinks.
I shouldn't be fishing in that radioactive lake.
That's right.
Now I've got no hair and chemo.
So, Edgar Cayce, born 1877, he passed away January 3rd, 1945, was an American clairvoyant who claimed to channel his higher self while asleep in a trance-like state. His words were recorded by his friend Al Lane, his wife Gertrude Evans, and later by his secretary Gladys Davis Turner. During these sessions, Cayce would answer questions on a variety of subjects like healing, reincarnation, dreams, the afterlife, past lives, nutrition, Atlantis, and future events. He was a devout Christian and Sunday school teacher, said his readings came from his subconscious mind exploring the dream realm, where according to him, all minds were timelessly connected. He also founded a nonprofit organization, the Association of Research and Enlightenment, to record and facilitate the study of his channeling and to also run a hospital. Cayce is known as the Sleeping Prophet, based on the title of journalist Jess Stern's 1967 Cayce biography. So this was, I would say, Cayce emerged during the height of spiritualism, late 1800s. Early 1900s is where we see a lot of people that claim to have clairvoyance and seances, that sort of thing, was really popular then. Edgar Cayce has many believers out there in the world today. Cayce was supposedly very, very intelligent. He was taken to church at the age 10, where he became engrossed in the Bible. Over the next 2 years, Cayce read it through from cover to cover a dozen times.
Wait, did he read it or did he sleep on it?
They say he read it at this stage. Must have been before he developed his sleeping on a book ability.
Right.
In May of 1889, while reading his Bible in his hut in the woods, Cayce claimed to have an encounter with a woman with wings who told him that his prayers had been answered. Makes you wonder what he was praying for, right? Had a woman with wings out in a hut in the middle of the woods.
Well, I just want to point out here, he didn't say it was an angel. He said it was a woman with wings. Now, that made me think, maybe it's not angel wings. Maybe it was a woman with like butterfly wings or maybe moth wings.
Or what about bat wings?
Well, I was thinking maybe it's a moth woman.
I mean, I'm thinking of Dungeons and Dragons. You remember the old monster manual?
Oh, yeah.
The succubus.
Ooh, yeah, could be.
Anyway, the woman with wings said his prayers were answered. The woman asked him what he wanted most of all, and Cayce explained to his later biographer that he had been frightened, but had told the woman that he wanted to help others, especially children. His parents were farmers. He grew up on a farm, a total of 6 children. Cayce, as a child, allegedly saw the ghost of his deceased grandfather. He was confident that it was indeed a ghost because it became transparent if he looked hard enough.
Wait a minute. He had to look hard enough that it became transparent? It didn't initially show itself as transparent?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess if you just kind of sort of looked over that way, maybe you wouldn't notice that you could see stuff through it.
Okay.
I mean, it depends on how transparent it is, right?
Yeah, but I mean, ghosts are normally transparent. I mean, was it solid to start with?
Well, he didn't get into the whole opacity of the ghost. Just that you could see through it at some level.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, I mean, if it was really transparent, then it'd be obvious. But I'm thinking he was maybe, let's say, 85% solid and then 15% transparent, right? I don't know. How do you even measure that?
I have no idea, but my point being that he wasn't transparent to start out with, and he had to look at him really hard before he became transparent.
Well, he just maybe looked at him really hard and noticed stuff on the other side of where he was standing. Like, hey, wait a minute, I can see the TV through Grandpa. You know, I don't know.
See the TV. Grandpa, don't worry. You can stay there. You don't have to move out of the way.
Yeah,
I can
you're
see
fine,
just
Grandpa.
fine.
Don't worry about moving. Anyway, there wasn't television back then.
Well, maybe he was seeing into the future.
Okay, good point. Cayce also claimed that in 1892 he had become the best student in his class. Upon being questioned, Cayce told the teacher that he saw pictures of pages in his books. His father, proud of his accomplishment, spread it around. During a school ball game, Cayce was struck in his tailbone and began to behave strangely. He claimed that he went to sleep one night, miraculously diagnosed the problem, and recommended a cure, all in his sleep, and that his family prepared the cure according to his instructions, and it worked perfectly. Cayce's alleged ability to diagnose in his sleep would not return for several years, though. So, what was the remedy for a sore butt?
Don't look at me.
I'm just wondering. I mean,
that's the beginning of hemorrhoid cream.
There was no detail on what the remedy was.
I don't know, but there were some frogs missing from the yard after that.
In December of 1893, Cayce family moved to Hopkinsville, Kentucky. During this time, Cayce received a 9th grade education, and he left the family farm to pursue other employment. Throughout his life, though, Cayce was drawn to church as a member of the Disciples of Christ. He read the Bible once a year, every year, and attended church and taught Sunday school and recruited missionaries. He also said later that he could see auras around people and spoke to angels and heard voices of departed relatives. In his early years, he agonized over whether these prophetic abilities were spiritually delivered from the highest source. He tried a few other professions. He had an insurance company. He also became a photographer, but he also developed this very severe case of laryngitis. This was around 1901. However, a traveling stage hypnotist and an entertainer named Hart, who referred to himself as the Laugh Man, was performing at Hopkinsville Opera House. Hart had heard about Cayce's throat condition and offered to attempt a cure. Cayce accepted his offer, and the experiment was conducted in the office of Manning Brown, a local throat specialist. Cayce's voice allegedly returned while he was in the hypnotic trance, but disappeared upon awakening. Hart tried post-hypnotic suggestion that the voice would continue to function after the trance, but this proved unsuccessful. A New York hypnotist, John Duncan Quackenbose.
What an unfortunate name.
I'm a therapist. My name is Quackenbose.
You could just call me Dr. Quack.
Everybody just calls me Quack for short. So anyway, yeah, he visited some of these hypnotists and visited this Quackenbose and discovered that they could put him in a trance and he could talk just fine when he was in the trance, but when he came out, he couldn't talk again.
Well, see, I read this all a little differently because he started out working with his father selling insurance, and it didn't last very long before he lost his voice. He became ill and lost his voice. Yeah. My thoughts are that he's like, man, this sucks. I hate selling insurance. I'm just going to stop talking.
Yeah. So I'm just going to act like I can't talk.
So then he heads back home and he becomes a photographer. So that's his new career. And that was his career for the rest of his life, his main career. Well, sort of, until this stuff took over. Then these guys say, he's like, man, I wish I could talk. Ooh, I can pretend to be hypnotized and I'll talk while I'm hypnotized. And it's like, I remember it being better. I'll just shut up again.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a good point. How did he talk when he was hypnotized? If there couldn't have been a physical problem with his voice box, right? I mean, it would have been impossible for that to happen if there was some kind of actual physical ailment with his voice.
Oh, yeah, there's a thing called psychogenic voice disorders. So, yeah, he could have been, that causes that, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the way he gets around the problem with his voice is that he gets this other hypnotist, Lane, to put him under and then ask Cayce, while he's been hypnotized, how to fix himself. And then he would tell him in this hypnotic state how to fix himself. So then
sort of like the tailbone episode.
Yeah. So it triggered this psychic capability of Cayce. Under this new paradigm, he's able to fix his voice. Now, from time to time, he would lose his voice again, and he would just have Lane come back and do the same process again, and then his voice would come back for some period of time. And that was how he was able to overcome the problem with losing his voice in this way.
During this time that Lane, who had suggested to Cayce that this ability had to be some type of clairvoyance. He's the one that suggested that Cayce offer his psychic diagnostic service to the public. It is said that Cayce was reluctant, that he had no idea what he was prescribing while he was asleep. He told Lane he did not want to know anything about the patient as it was not relative. He finally agreed that he would do some of these readings on the condition that the readings would be free, and also specifying that if the readings ever hurt anyone, he'd never do another. And so he began, with Lane's help, to offer free treatments to the two townspeople. Lane described Cayce's method as a self-imposed hypnotic trance which induces clairvoyance. Reports of Cayce's work appeared in the newspapers, which inspired many postal inquiries. Cayce stated he could work just as effectively using a letter from the individual as with the person being present in the room. Given only the person's name and location, Cayce said he could diagnose the physical and mental conditions of what he termed the entity and then provide a remedy. Cayce was still reticent and worried. He said one dead patient was all he needed to become a murderer. In fact, his fiancée, Gertrude Evans, agreed with him.
Well, this is the period of time when he starts. He's in Bowling Green, Kentucky. He's moved there from Hopkinsville, and he started up a photography studio, which, knowing the ins and outs of insurance, I'm not saying that plays into the fact that 2 different photography studios burned down. I'm just saying that might be a coincidence. I don't know what his insurance looked like on the buildings, but...
Let's see. Now, he used to be in the insurance business, and 2 of his photography studios burned down. I'm not saying anything here, but
yeah. So,
what do you think?
I'm going to put this out there. Maybe he just has bad luck.
But with the clairvoyant, seems like he'd see that coming, right?
Well, maybe he doesn't see his own future the same way.
Okay, sure.
I know he sees his past, and we'll get into that later, but... Well, he did see his death, so I guess he could see his future. So maybe he maybe he saw the future and he just increased the insurance rate on his buildings.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
that's a good point. No details on that. Now, during this time, when in Bowling Green, Kentucky, Cayce and Gertrude Evans married on June 17, 1903, and went on to have 3 children. Gertrude disapproved of the readings, and Cayce still agonized over the morality of them. A few days after the hypnotist, Lane revealed the activity to the professionals at a boarding house, one of whom was a magistrate and a journalist, after which state medical authorities forced Lane to close his practice. He left to acquire osteopathic qualifications in Franklin.
So essentially, he surrounds himself with these 3 doctors. They want to start up a new company that focuses on Edgar's talents to diagnose the problems, and then they would just piggyback off him. It's sort of like being a general practitioner today, where you don't do a whole lot. You just sort of have, Doctor, it hurts when I do this. Oh, you need to see this specialist. That'd be $400. So sort of like a general practitioner.
And then Cayce's kind of like the CAT scan.
Yeah.
Or the X-ray machine.
The X-ray machine. The all-in-one machine, really, because he does everything.
I don't know. Let's run you through the Cayce device and let's find out what's wrong with you.
Cayce device. Oh, sorry, we got to feed it first. It gets cranky if it doesn't eat. Now, the one curious thing that happened, I think it was around 1912 or so, Gertrude loses her second child. There wasn't anything Cayce could do. I mean, his diagnostic skills, I guess, he hadn't been fed, whatever. But for whatever reason, his diagnosis skills were not able to save their second child. However, she did fall ill with tuberculosis, very sick. He came up with a cure for her, and she actually got better. He's batting 50% here in his own family. And after that, I guess this is his Bowling Green days. After that, he decides that he's going to pick up and move. And I'm not sure if this was right after the second fire. I'm not saying, but he decides to get up and move, and he starts another company. He quits the other medical profession because he said that they weren't backing him. I guess there was some discrepancies about the validity of some of his readings. So he quit, and he moved to Selma, Alabama, to work for the Tressler photography firm. This is where his fame and the volume of his work starts to go on a big rise, where it balloons.
And he also begins asking for donations. Before, his work was free. I'm assuming when he went into business with the 3 doctors, the other professionals back in Bowling Green, I'm sure they charged and he was paid that way. But he begins asking for voluntary donations to support himself and his family. He said so that, and so that he could do this full time.
Mm-hmm.
To help raise money, he invented Pit, a card game based on the commodities trading at the Chicago Board of Trade. The game is still sold today. He continued to work in an apparent trance state with a hypnotist all his life. His wife and his elder son later replaced Lane in this role, and then a secretary, Gladys Davis, recorded his readings in shorthand. With all this growing fame, Cayce became very popular. He was in all the newspapers. He attracted several eager, commercially minded men who wanted to seek a fortune by using his clairvoyant abilities. Even though Cayce was reluctant to help them, he was persuaded to give his readings, which left him dissatisfied with himself and unsuccessful. A cotton merchant offered him $100 a day for his readings about the daily outcomes in the cotton market. However, despite his poor finances, Cayce refused this merchant's offer. Some people wanted to know where to hunt for treasures, while other people wanted to know the outcome of horse races. I mean, makes sense. If you can be clairvoyant and see the future, a bit like, why not? And today, right now, today, who knows, somebody's maybe going to win it as we record this. But the Powerball lottery is $1.6 billion. If you're clairvoyant, hey man, what's those numbers going to be?
Come on, man.
Then you're wealthy. Why would you would never have to give another reading for your rest of your life?
Hey, stop bringing logic into this conversation. Let's move on to Dayton, Ohio, period.
Let's do it.
Let's look it up. So he meets this wealthy printer, Arthur Lammers, and Lammers is also a study of metaphysics. And he convinces Cayce to move to Dayton, Ohio, because not Alabama.
It's a lot cooler there.
Yeah.
Before the days of air conditioning.
Right. And Ohio, Dayton, Ohio is a wonderful town. I said that with a straight face. And you could go to Dayton, Ohio,
Delaware.
And do all. Yeah.
We're in Dayton.
So you could go to Dayton, Ohio, and do all kinds of fun things like walk down the street and look at feed stores. And Cayce.
Now, hold on. That's a happening place. Isn't this where the Wright brothers were from? Where they built their aeroplanes?
They didn't build their aeroplanes there, did they?
Sure they did.
Aeroplanes?
They just went down the Kitty Hawk and tested their very first flyer.
Okay.
They just used it because of the winds and the dunes and stuff. But no, they did most of their work right there in Ohio.
Okay, Mr. History. Dayton, Ohio, a hopping place. Full of metaphysics and strange medicines, was a place where Cayce threw up his little sign outside of his shop and started working for Lammers, or with him, rather. He decided to accept the work and ask his family to join him in Dayton, so his whole crew came up. This is where he directed his activities to provide readings centered around health. A lot of readings were about remedies that were channeled, and this is what he's most famous for. And he often proclaimed remedies that utilize things like electrotherapy, ultraviolet light, diet, massage, less mental work, more relaxation. He was basically a New Age hippie in his remedies. He stays in Dayton, Ohio for a couple of years before he moves to Virginia Beach to pursue the last part of his life, where he would do most of the later part of his readings, and this is where some of the more, can we say, typical metaphysical, psychic, New Age, weird-ass, Atlantis-style, ancient Egypt stuff comes out.
So now that he's in the Virginia Beach period, he'll live here for essentially the rest of his days, and starting from 1925 to 1945. He lives here about 20 years until the end of his life. By this time, he's a professional psychic with a small number of employees and volunteers, and his readings increasingly came to involve the occult or esoteric type themes. Money was extremely scarce, but with the help from interested persons, the idea of an association and a hospital was once again mooted.
Here's where I get out of that. In 1931, we got the Depression. His regular psychic stuff wasn't getting money flowing in the doors because people were tightening up. He had to go a little bit more above and beyond. So that's where he starts bringing in things like the Akashic records, astrology, past life relationships, soulmates, and other bizarre subjects that are more, like you said, in line with the occult.
He just had to up his game.
Yeah. And this is around the same time he starts the ARE, which is the Association for Research and Enlightenment, which still exists today. And that's where the archive of all of the Cayce predictions and psychic readings reside, at least the ones that were recorded, because presumably about 14,000 of them have been recorded, but there was a period of time where they say between 4,000 and 8,000 were not recorded. And that was before they started actually writing the stuff down. And, you know, he was asked to teach people how to do this because presumably, at least he had said that it was fairly easy to do and anyone could do it. So he started teaching classes. And today there's about 10,000 plus people who are Cayceites, my term. I don't know that anyone else has done that, you know, so maybe someone else has coined that term, but we're just going to go with a bunch of Cayceites out there using fainting couches, I assume, to give psychic readings. How accurate these are, who knows?
He started forming these study groups, and from his altered state, Cayce related to the group that the purpose of life is not to become psychic, but to become more spiritually aware and a loving person. Study group number 1 was told that they could bring light to a waiting world, and that these lessons would still be studied 100 years into the future. The readings were now about dreams, coincidence, otherwise known as synchronicity, developing intuition, Akashic records, astrology, past life relationships, soulmates, and other esoteric subjects.
So there's this, I guess this study called anthroposophy. I think I'm saying that correctly. It was a spiritualist movement, and within that, they had this concept of the Akashic records, which was a record of everything every living creature in the universe, not just humans, had experienced both in the past, the present, and the future. You could tap into this and gain knowledge of anyone in the universe, and the idea being that to some degree, or in its entirety, Cayce was accessing that Akashic record when he was doing his readings. So it was part of his, at least part of the shtick that a lot of people associated with him. Whether he said himself that he was doing that, I didn't dive into it deep enough to know, but I don't think that, at least in the stuff that I read, that he ever directly said that I'm accessing the Akashic records. He was more aligned with accessing a library that was provided by God, essentially, being the religious person he was.
So he got so popular during this era, especially by the 1940s. I mean, got so much mail. Remember, he could do some of his readings from the mail. They said the mailman could no longer carry all of his mail every day.
Yeah.
That he got so much mail. He had some very famous clients that I'm not sure you're aware of. Woodrow Wilson.
Yep, knew that.
Was a client. Thomas Edison.
Yeah, didn't help him any because, you know, Tesla won out in the end.
I don't know, man. Are you from alternate reality or something?
What are you talking about? I mean, it's not like Thomas Edison could go to Edgar Cayce and say, "Hey,
you're talking about
I got this jackass who's made this alternating current machine, and I've got this DC current machine. How do I beat him? Well, electrocute a bunch of animals."
Well, you know what? That was that's a good point. They kind of lost out on the electric war.
Yeah.
Not necessarily Tesla, more or less Westinghouse, I would say.
Fair enough.
Tesla died penniless in the 1940s, and Edison was pretty wealthy. So
yeah, who else on the list? Anybody else really famous?
Yeah, there was Irving Berlin and George Gershwin, and there.
Oh, really? That Russian, Mr. Berlin? Wasn't he a Russian dude?
Yeah, it says Russian American composer, songwriter, and lyricist.
Okay, he was Russian American.
That's a funny name for. I bet they changed his name.
Oh yeah, it
Had to be.
His original name was Boris. Boris Kamenov.
Cayce was very popular, did a lot of prophesizing. There were a lot of books written around this time. As if he couldn't get even more famous, in 1943, he gained national prominence with the publication of a high-profile article in Coronet magazine titled The Miracle Man of Virginia Beach. It's during World War II. A lot of people's sons, fathers, and husbands were dying in the war. So he had many requests from loved ones. So he increased the frequency of his readings during this time. And he would try to do at least 8 a day and make a little bit of an impression on this ever-growing pile of requests that he had. And he said that this took a toll on his health. And it was emotionally draining to try and answer these letters. And he could only do 8 readings a day, but the mailman's bringing such a large sack that he can't even carry it each and every day.
Yeah, I'm wondering, what are they asking him?
Probably just want to ask, is he in heaven? Will I see him again? I don't know.
Is he still alive? Is MIA mean missing, or is he really KIA? Those kind of things.
Yeah, it's a good point.
That would make
so things like that
would wear on me if I was a fake psychic and had a conscious.
So let's talk about what are some of the prophecies, the more esoteric prophecies did he make during his lifetime?
Esoteric?
Well, let's say just not a personal clairvoyant reading for someone. For instance, I know that he predicted Atlantis would be found in the 1960s. In fact, you know what? I have a list of some of his predictions here.
Yeah, one I want to bring up before we jump into like some of the good stuff like Atlantis, which I actually enjoy. This is my favorite part of the Cayce story. The Essenes, which is a sect of Jewish peoples from the late BC, early AD eras. You had basically you had many sects, but primarily 3 around that time. I think it was the Pharisees, the Sadducees, I think was the other one, and then you had the Essenes. Now, the Essenes were, at least in the history books of the day, the first history book I'm thinking is Pliny's historical accounts, say the Essenes were a monastic group of Jewish advocates or Jewish peoples, a sect of Jewish peoples. The thing with Cayce is presumably before the Dead Sea Scrolls were found and before modern 20th century archaeologists had discovered that the Essenes were not a monastic tradition. They actually had men and women working together and in some cases becoming married. He had predicted that was the case, and that the Dead Sea Scrolls would be found, and that the Essenes were the source of it, and that they recorded all this information. And that's not entirely true, because there was another historian called Josephus, also in 1st century AD, who recounted a subsect of the Essenes that did get married, had a 3-year probationary period where they would abstain from marriage, and then I guess they would interact with women during that time, but, keep it all clean, and then get married. So that information was available to him. He was apparently a voracious reader. So
yeah,
you got to be careful.
He could just sleep on a book.
Or he could sleep on a book. And what he did,
he put the book under his pillow.
Right. And then if all of it didn't get into his brain, he could just make up the rest of it. Either way.
Yeah.
This is one of the things. And he also filled in the gaps in Jesus' life. So you have these gaps in his childhood with only around age 12, with him going on the temple steps and talking with the Pharisees and correcting them. Other than that, and you don't have any other information in the Bible, he fills in those gaps, much like you would see with Joseph Smith filling in the gaps for the North American experience of Jesus. So, those are 2 things that were...
The Book of Mormon.
Yeah. Yeah, there's the Book of Mormon and the Book of Cayce, which I don't know that I've read that one yet, but sounds fantastic.
Here's some of the predictions that he made, and I'll let you be the judge if they...
Okay, let's hear them.
If they've come true or not.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the top 10 predictions, according to a list created here. In 1938, Edgar Cayce predicted that a portion of the temples may yet be discovered under the slime of ages and seawater, expected in 68 or 69, not so far away, are the words that are quoted. The Bimini Road was discovered in 1968, and Cayce said it was the rising of Atlantis. Many people believe the Bimini Road is actually a portion of Atlantis, and Edgar Cayce was correct in his prediction. He described Atlantis as being an ancient civilization that equal size to Europe and having a much superior technology. He also said Atlantis disappeared somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean some 10,000 years ago. Went on to say Atlantis went into three major periods of division, the first two occurring around 15,600 BC. The mainland divided into islands, which Cayce named Poseida, Og, and Aaron. He also said the people of Atlantis built giant laser-like crystals for power plants, which caused the destruction of the land. Cayce blamed the final destruction of the land and their culture on greed and lust. And finally, he said there was a large migrations of Atlanteans to Egypt, and that the sinking of the last remnants of Atlantis were due to the biblical flood of Noah.
Okay, so this one's fun for me. So, do you know who Randall Carlson is?
Rambo?
No, not Rambo Carlson. That's old man Carlson's old other boy. This is Randall Carlson. So Randall Carlson, I believe, is a geologist, I want to say. He has a lot of theories about things that happened around 12,000 years ago, including the comet strike theory, which increasingly through academic papers is becoming more and more agreed upon that event very likely occurred, and that there was a melting of the glaciers at this time that caused these immense flood events that probably is the basis for the flood stories that we see in written word in mankind, told down through oral tradition until written word came along in the form of Sumerian tablets. And then from there, from the, Gilgamesh. So we have Randall Carlson believes that Atlantis was a real place, and he has made a case for it being in the middle of the Atlantic, and there's this underwater ridge, and we know that the water levels were 300 feet lower, and it's very likely that this ridge area, and there appears to be some kinds of structures or something there, which may indicate that it was at some point an island, that there was a civilization on it, at least enough to build up some structures. He's been right about a lot of things, too. So he postulates this, and it's entirely possible that there was an Atlantis, that it did exist there. Now, the Bimini Road thing, Bimini is part of the Bahamas. It's probably the part closest to the United States. It's to the east of Miami, almost directly east, I believe, of Miami, in the Atlantic Ocean. And the thought is that from Bimini all the way down to the Yucatan Peninsula, where the Gulf of Mexico is now, that's where the edge of this huge island supposedly existed, going all the way up almost to the Straits of Gibraltar. The underground, the underwater topography of the ocean floor doesn't lend itself to that being likely. Plus the Bimini Road, which is something we've all looked at least those of us who are interested in the Atlantis, we've seen those documentaries on the Bimini Road theory, and the geologists have already said pretty much that what they found there looks like a road, but it's actually a natural geological feature that occurs. So not likely that part, but some parts of it sort of make sense.
Yeah.
Maybe. It's hard to say. It's interesting, though, that he puts this together, though it's not without cause, because past the Straits of Gibraltar is where most people agree that Plato had indicated this is where it was going to be, and Solus
Pillars of Hercules, right?
Pillars of Hercules, right, which the Straits of Gibraltar, presumably that's where it was. And then, so it's an interesting thing. It's pretty cool, and it excites the imagination that maybe Cayce had tapped into something, another realm, the Akashic record, whatever, and gleaned this information about this ancient civilization. And who knows, maybe we find something one day that gives credence to it. I don't know. It's cool stuff, though.
Yeah, and I think it's a pretty big coincidence when the Bimini Road was discovered in 1968. Cayce's prediction was that a portion of Atlantis, of course, he said temples may yet be discovered in 68 or 69. So that's a pretty big coincidence, especially naming the location. that these blocks were found. But most scientists agree these are geological formations, but they look very look very geometric, like it's a road or blocks laid down.
I wonder if maybe he taps into something like future information, and he's tapping into a documentary on History Channel, Ancient Aliens.
There you go.
Ancient Atlantis. And he doesn't know because,
I never thought about that.
Yeah, he grew up.
That's perfect.
Yeah. He grew up in a time where they didn't have television. So he's getting this information in, and he's taking it as truth, when really it's just, the History Channel trying to make money on not history shows.
Think about that. I mean, that you make an excellent point, because he said he was tapping into some library, right? Mm-hmm. But what if he, ran across a book written by a UFO guy or something about the Bermuda Triangle or something, right?
Yeah.
Would he relay that information, whether it's true or not? The next prediction was the death of two presidents.
Oh, I hadn't heard
In
this
1939, Edgar Cayce predicted the deaths of two presidents by saying, "You are to have turmoil, you are to have strife between capital and labor. You are to have a division in your own land before you have the second of the presidents that next will not live through his office, mob rule." Now, we know that in 1945, President Roosevelt died in office. And Cayce went on to say, "Unless there is more give and take, consideration for those who produce, with better division of the excess profits from labor, there must be a greater turmoil in the land."
Yeah, it's almost like he's channeling Marx.
Yeah, and then President Kennedy, of course, as we know, was assassinated in November of 1963. Okay. The Atlantis thing I can see.
Mm-hmm.
This, I have no idea what he's saying. This is like Nostradamus here.
Most of his stuff.
Beware the elf in the Seven Hills. It's like, it can mean anything.
And then, right? Every time a carny goes through there, he's like, "Man, I get accosted by all these Caseites."
So this prediction to me is somebody reading past events into something that was spoken. That's the same thing that they do we'll do an episode on Nostradamus sometime and go through some of the quatrains. Hindsight's 2020. Oh, that's what he meant by that. See?
Yeah, you're not buying that one.
I mean, to me, this is not a...
Yeah.
All right, here's another one. Collapse of the Soviet Union. Edgar Cayce predicted the fall of communism and the collapse of the Soviet Union. He said, "Through Russia comes the hope of the world, not in respect what is sometimes termed communism or Bolshevism, no, but freedom, that each man will live for his fellow man. The principle has been born there. It will take years for it to be crystallized, yet out of Russia comes again the hope of the world."
Wow, Vladimir Putin's never been called the hope of the world before, but...
Right. And it says the Soviet Union dissolved as a nation in 1991, abandoned communism, and instituted economic and political freedom. Well, whoever wrote this article, I wouldn't exactly call it political freedom now. Not even close.
Not even close.
To me, this prediction is not a prediction at all. In the 1930s, it was known as the Red Decade around the entire world. Russia, which became the Soviet Union, was the very first communist nation based on the ideals of Karl Marx, the idea of collectivism and everyone's equal, no gender bias, no class, right? Which was, of course, everywhere in Europe in those days. A class-based system, nobility and all that kind of stuff, right?
Everybody has to stand in the same bread line.
Exactly. So in the 1930s, for a lot of people, this is pre-World War II, a lot of people didn't know what Stalin was all about in those days. And communism was a very popular movement. There were plenty of communists in the United States. Communism didn't become a dirty word in the United States until after World War II, when we had the Red Scare and fear of communism because of, when the Soviet Union became our enemy. But during the 1930s, communism became very, very popular Spain had a civil war. They wanted, when you saw a revolution at the end of World War II or saw revolutions during this era, there were almost always communists trying to overthrow these governments because they, the same way the Soviets overthrew the Tsarist Russia. So I don't look at this as being any kind of a prediction. Edgar Cayce grew up very poor, and in the 1930s, many people we're talking the Great Depression here, many people looked at communism as the answer. Get rid of capitalism, where we have these rich families that own everything. Get rid of nobility in Europe and hereditary inheritances and all this, right? So,
yeah,
not a prediction.
Nah.
Stock market crash and Great Depression. In 1924, Cayce predicted the stock market would crash in 1929 and also taught his clients how to prepare for the crash and how to play the bull market. His clients did not pay attention to him and lost all they had when the stock market crashed. He also foresaw the Great Depression, which he said the stock market crash was the trigger for, and said it would lift in the spring of 1933. And this person said it did. Well, it didn't.
So he's sort of like the Michael Burry of the 1920s, 1930s.
Well, there's not a quote here, so I can't really say. But no, the Depression did not end in 1933. What we saw was in 1932 was Roosevelt being elected and making a lot of changes. They gave a lot of people hope, and we saw a lot of government programs, but the economy did not recover
until after the war.
World War II.
Yeah.
And, so I don't know whether that one's true or not.
What else you got?
I don't know what he wrote. So.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, here's a good one. Rise and fall of Adolf Hitler. Edgar Cayce predicted in January of 1934 that Adolf Hitler would rise in power to reign over Germany. Cayce stated that imperialism is entering. Then in August of 1935, he predicted Hitler would remain in power until it will come as an overthrow or an outside war. I don't see any paranormal there or any kind of special knowledge to guess those things in 1934 and 1935. Hitler had already seized power by then.
Right.
Became the absolute Fuhrer.
Yeah.
There were dangerous things going on in the 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of people predicted that there was going to be war with France.
Yeah. What about the Hall of Records? That's an exciting one. His prediction for the Hall of Records, that the Atlanteans had secured copies of all of their knowledge from the beginning of time up to the point of the Great Cataclysm, which saw their island sink beneath the waves. They had 3 separate copies, one placed in Bimini, another placed in Egypt, and the third in the Yucatan, and that those are going to be revealed to us. And then we will have all this great, amazing knowledge that we can leverage to make a better world. Now, I don't know what date we're supposed to find this stuff, but one of them is in the secret chamber beneath the Sphinx.
Yeah, they've been scanning the Sphinx, trying to find those secret passages.
There is something under there.
There is a cavity there. Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah.
Here's one. In 1932, Cayce predicted that the Jews would return to Israel and advised the Jews to regard the anti-Semitism in Europe as the time to fulfill the biblical prophecy for them to return. The nation of Israel was established in May 1948, as Cayce had predicted, which was then followed by a war between Israel and the Arab countries surrounding it. I don't know. What do you think on that one? 1932,
I didn't see his. Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, that's a pretty good prediction, right?
I don't know that he...
depending on what he said. What did he say?
I don't know if he necessarily predicted that Israel would be founded in 1948.
Yeah, most of these predictions that I see when I see them written out, he always hedges his bets with these perhaps or I feel or these equivocating words that you see a lot of psychics use. I think if you're if you're a true psychic in 1935, this would be something that would convince me. Doug Stanhope, farmer, in 1978, will go and buy a lottery ticket, but it will be a losing lottery ticket. But if he follows the advice here in my thing, he will win. And the lottery ticket will be the numbers in the following locations in his hovel in the middle of Dayton, Ohio. It's going to be the number on the 7th page of the 3rd book from the left on the top shelf in your dining room. And then the next one's going to be in the Bible that's in your house. And he gives the exact numbers. And then this farmer finds that information and says, holy crap, I'm Dan Stanhope. I live in Dayton, Ohio. I have a farmhouse. I have all these things. Well, let me pull these out. Blah, 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 blah. Wins lottery. That's a prediction. Be very specific of the dates, the times, the people, the locations, all of that information. Give it to somebody who hasn't heard it before, and then if it comes true, then okay, Bob's your uncle.
Yeah. I don't know there's ever been any very specific. I'll be listeners, if you know of any predictions that were very specific, maybe not quite as specific as Jimmy's example just now, but very specific, say within a year, within a date. That'd be interesting. I mean, again, the Atlantis thing, maybe. Right?
Yeah, and don't
Finding
equivocate.
something about Atlantis in 1968 or 69. I mean, I don't know what it takes to have clairvoyance.
And how do you know that it's clairvoyance, or you're just saying something and someone else is making that come true because they're working towards it the minute they hear it?
That's true. Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
So this prediction about the Jews in 1932, there were already Jewish settlers in Palestine in 1932.
Well, in the book of Revelations, doesn't it say that one of the precursors to Armageddon was that the nation of Israel would once more be established, become powerful? So you have it in the book of Revelation. So he's a voracious reader. He reads the Bible every year. So it's almost like he's piggybacking off of, predictions made in the Holy Book before.
The book of Revelations, the establishment of Israel, one of the signs of the coming apocalypse, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I mean, that's something a lot of people had considered.
Self-fulfilling prophecy in that case.
Yeah. Alliance between USA and Russia. During the time of the Soviet Union, Edgar Cayce predicted that Russia would one day be an ally of the United States. He said, "For changes are coming, this may be sure, an evolution or revolution in the ideas of religious thought. The basis of it for the world will eventually come out of Russia. Not communism, no, but rather that which is the basis of the same as the Christ taught, his kind of communism."
Well, there you go.
I'm not quite sure what, because once again, this writer says that it came true in 1991, but I didn't really see any great alliance between the United States and the Soviet Union or former Soviet Union or Russia after 1991.
We had a kid in elementary school that ran into the basketball goalpost, smack dab into it, hit his head, conked out. When he came to, he talked like that. I'm just saying.
This is one of the big ones. I had a friend back in the early 90s who came to my house, and we talked about UFOs and a lot of this kind of stuff. And he loved Edgar Cayce. He read a lot of books on Edgar Cayce. And I remember this one specifically because he thought it was right around the corner. It was going to happen in the next 4 or 5 years.
Right.
That was many years ago. Shift of the Earth's magnetic poles.
Oh, yeah, this is a good one.
Edgar Cayce described the concept of the shifting of the poles as the result of the crust of the Earth moving independently from the core to bring a different surface area over the spin axis in the late 1920s and early 1930s. This process has received more and more attention by geophysicists. He predicted that changes to the Earth's surface would begin sometime between 1958 and 1998. The cause of the changes being the shift in the world's magnetic poles around the year 2000. Cayce said when this occurs, it would bring reversals in the world's climates. Where there has been a frigid or semi-tropical climate, there will be a more tropical one, and moss and fern will grow. According to NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, something changed in the Earth's gravitational field, which moved the magnetic poles closer together in 1998. This confirms Cayce's pole shift. What do you think on that one?
I think he probably got the idea from Jules Verne. There's a there's a book, something. What's the name of it?
Journey to the Earth's Core.
the purchase of the North Pole or something like that, where he has this artificial pole shift in there, and that was late 1800s. So certainly he's probably got the idea from there, or someone else has, because it was a very popular pseudoscientific claim made in the early 1900s. Now we know that pole shifting's possible. The core can move.
There's true north and true south. Then there's magnetic north and
Right.
magnetic south. They're
That's
two
the
different things.
declination you have on maps, the difference between true and magnetic.
Closer you travel to the north and south pole, the more divergence you get there.
Yeah, I just think that his claim is a little bit more... I think the reality is anticlimactic compared to the claim made, and I don't think they align really well.
Well, right. And I remember many people that have written about Edgar Cayce in this particular prediction. They were looking for a dramatic shift that would alter, for instance, the North Pole may be in New York City, okay, and suddenly New York City's frozen over, and the South Pole is whatever's on the other side, somewhere in China, I guess, right?
Right. That's total nonsense. But
well, there were some theories in the 19th century that the ice ages, because we knew these were the remnants of the glaciers and things, that it wasn't a climate change, but that it was some kind of pole shift, because we know the southern hemisphere wasn't affected the same way the northern hemisphere was. So there were some theories that the pole shifted or somehow caused the whole northern hemisphere to become more covered with ice. There's some other anecdotal evidence that can support that theory that the poles shifted at some point. And, for instance, the flash freezing of the mammoths have often been used. We know that some of the mammoths found today that are frozen were frozen very quickly. So that's an example that a lot of people that still actually believe this to be true, that's happened at some point in the past. It kind of blew it here, though, 1958 to 1998, unless something happened and we don't know about it. Or, I mean, the magnetic poles shift around all the time. We know that. It's just something that happens.
well, like Yoda said, always in motion the future is. So...
All right. Last one that I have is his own death. So Edgar Cayce, his visions warned him that he should not use his psychic abilities more than twice a day or he would have serious health problems. Cayce received thousands of requests and he ignored his own warnings. It went on with the readings anyway. On January 1st, 1945, Edgar Cayce predicted that he would be buried in 4 more days. He died of a stroke on January 3rd, 1945, and is buried in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, the same town in which he was born.
So he predicted his death?
Yeah, he predicted his death on January 1st. He said he was going to be buried in 4 days. So they say. No real public. I mean, I don't know. Maybe.
Good job. I mean, well done. That's a good way to...
sucked, but... man, I'm going to be dead in 4 days.
Well, I mean, that's putting a capstone on top of the pile, the 14,000 plus predictions you made. It's not too bad. Yeah. The one that kills me is that China will be the cradle of Christianity. That was one of his predictions.
When's that going to be?
I think it was already supposed to happen, but maybe he was off by a couple of 1,000 years or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have that one. This one, the writer obviously tried to list predictions that they believed had come true, even though many of them, I think most of these are pretty questionable.
Well, he predicted Tesla. Some people are saying because he had a claim for a self-fueling perpetual motion machine, and that is Tesla. So I think he predicted Tesla too. Again, with all of these claims, given that they were written like he had ran into a metal pole and hit his head, and that there's a lot of words that are used like perhaps, I believe, I feel, which I'm not a fan of.
What you always see with clairvoyants and prophets, I mean, even today, the trick is to be vague.
Yep. And my question to you is, do you think he believed that he was psychic?
I mean, in my research, he definitely tried to convince some people that he was. I think he was probably influenced by that hypnotist, the stage hypnotist,
At a young age.
around 1900. I mean, people have spun his story. Let's say he's a fraud. Let's just sake of argument here.
Sure.
But let's say he's had this insurance business and it failed or whatever, trying to be a photographer, and then he runs into this guy that's a stage hypnotist. They strike up a friendship. They come up with this story that he has laryngitis. He gets Cayce to come out during one of his shows and says, this man has laryngitis. He can't talk. And then, he starts miming and everything. But I'm going to put him in a trance. Puts him in a trance and he starts to talk. Okay, that sounds really simple and silly today. Like everybody be like, that's crap. But people, I swear, were very gullible or something back in those days. I mean, when I hear some of the stuff people fell for, and then when you're writing your own history, you can always go back and say things like a woman with wings told me, asked me for a gift, or that I was already doing these remedies for people, all those things, right? When you're going back and writing your history years later, you can always change things around a bit.
Yeah.
But I feel like looking at his history, he meets up with a hypnotist who, quote, treats him for his laryngitis. And he can talk when he's not, and then word gets out about it, right? And then that guy moves on, they split or whatever. And then he gets in with another guy that's a hypnotist. And now they're doing the cures. Like, hey, go rub some snake oil on it, you'll feel better. And then, you know what I mean? It's like he's probably in his town already built this reputation of the going into a trance and using these voices and stuff. So now we're going to do it to help people with, come up with these remedies, these cures. I don't know, man.
Yeah.
And it just kind of builds from there. But it feels like to me that he just learned some things from these hypnotists who were already traveling around, and they're quote, quote, hypnotists.
Right.
With some kind of,
So
stage show.
Yeah. I'd read that, he had received letters, and from the letters, he would go into his trance and provide cures to the people who wrote the letters.
Right.
In many cases, he would provide cures to people who were dead. So he's
had already died by the time the letter
by the time he read the letter and laid back on his fainting couch. But, he still took the time out. Nice guy. You're dead, but were you not dead, this would be the cure.
But, it's one of those things, a movement can grow like that. I mean, who was we looking at? We were looking at somebody just recently that, I don't think we did a show on it, but that started this same thing, started a thing where you too can become a psychic, right? And all these people sign up and show up and it was the psychic spies. That's what it was. We did do a show on it.
Third Eye Spies. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of the guys now have like these big seminars and all these people show up and draw and say, yeah, I think I did see that. I did see that building,
Again, I don't know why I picked this as a topic. I just, I'm too skeptical of psychics.
Oh, I mean, it's part of what we do, Weird Wonders in the World. So, yeah. I mean, it's...
I don't think I'm giving Cayce a fair shake, man. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a bit skeptical about any psychic. I just, I don't know, man. Especially these people predicting the future. We used to have one around here in my area. It would publish stuff in the paper. I don't know why people... It's like reading your horoscope every day. It's so freaking vague, man. It means nothing. And then, like, for instance, this psychic, occasionally she would get something right. Okay, the kind of thing that if you're really paying attention to the news or really paying attention to things, you can come out with stuff. You're going to hit it once in a while.
Yeah.
Or you can be very observant or think about, like, when they ask you about a police case or something. You can look at the statistics. Okay, there's a missing girl. Usually these people, if they're found, usually turn up dead. I mean, unfortunately, but that's the truth, right? So you're pretty safe to go down that road. And I saw that Sylvia Brown do that, right? I mean, she told that poor woman whose daughter had been a captive for years and years in Cleveland. Sylvia Brown's on Oprah or one of those stupid daytime shows and said, I'm sorry, but your daughter's dead. And she wasn't dead. She was alive. She was held captive for years and years. And then her mother went to her grave believing that her daughter was dead when actually she had been alive the whole time and escaped eventually. So to me, that shows that woman's a fraud. Okay. So just like this local psychic we had, she once predicted that the Grant supermarket, there were some subterranean caverns, and the Grant supermarket was gonna collapse or was gonna sink into the ground. Right. Well, that never happened. Still hasn't happened.
Well, give it time. Give it time.
So, and you don't have, like you said, you don't have to put a date on it. You don't have to say.
Yeah, be specific.
I have a hard time with psychics. I would have to just.
If I read a horoscope at the end of the day, right, that was very specific to me, like, I get my horoscope and I read it and it says, "You're going to lose your wallet today." Holy crap! I lost my wallet today. Your dog got sprayed by a skunk. Which happened to me this week.
That really happened, didn't it?
Yeah, that happened to me this week. It was awful. Did I tell you about this?
Yeah, you told me.
It was awful. It's awful. We're up at 2 a.m, like trying to get everything cleaned up, and it's just stunk for days. We shaved our dog. We took her to the groomer and shaved. She looks funny now. But
they shaved her.
Oh, yeah, we shaved her completely down, and they sprayed her with all kinds of chemicals and stuff, and now she smells like a skunky chemical thing. But yeah, if I got to the end of the day and it said all those things that happened to me throughout that day, and it was written and published in the newspaper that morning, and there was all the newspaper, so I knew it was published and presented before those events happened, and they were very specific, like, you lost your wallet, it had $20 in it. Your day's going to suck because you're not going to get your coffee, because when you go get the coffee, you're going to find your wallet isn't there. And then you're going to get to work and you're going to find out the phone system isn't working. And because the phone system isn't working, you're going to find out later in the day that you're behind on a project. And then when you get home, you're going to find out your dog was sprayed by a skunk. And then your house is going to stink for the rest of the week. I'd be like, holy crap, I'm reading this guy every time, because then I know what's going to go on.
And then your horoscope probably says something like tonight, stay in with family or stay in with loved ones.
Yeah.
A loved one may reach out to you for advice.
Yeah. What the hell?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing about astrology. How in the world could the position of planets and stars affect my life, affect anyone's life? We're going to do one on astrology because, as you know, I've gotten into astronomy lately.
Not the same thing.
And it is not the same thing. However, they have the same origin, the study of the stars and planets, the movement of them through the heavens. So we're going to talk about astrology sometime. I had a friend, same friend actually, that was into Edgar Cayce, who also was into astrology. And, he would do those personal readings where it went down to the day you were, the hour on the day that you were born, and, whether Mercury was in opposition to this and that, and in some kind of house and all this other stuff, and made these vast predictions about your personality.
Yeah, one of those things is assisted by math, and the other topic is assisted by fluorescent mushrooms.
Maybe. All right, man. Do you have anything you want to add about Edgar Cayce tonight?
No, I fraud.
Okay. Well, all right. I think we are going to get on out of here. I'd like to remind everyone, please rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. It helps other people find the show. Our webpage is cosmicsponge.com. Contact information, first contact at cosmicsponge.com. Look for us on Instagram and Facebook. Jimmy, did I leave anything out?
No, I don't think so.
All right. With that being said, this is Stephen Hawk signing out, and we'll see you next week.
And Jimmy Coe, keep your eyes to the skies and your feet on the ground. We'll catch you next week.
I predict your dog's fur is going to grow back.
I predict the same thing.
And it'll be brown.
You think?
I don't know. What color's your dog?
Brown. I think it's a pretty good prediction, but I think you have some inside skinny on dog.
By this time next year, your dog's fur will return.
By this time next year, the skunk will return.
All right, man, let's get out of here.
All right, later, dude. That's all for this week's episode of Cosmic Sponge. Please don't forget to rate and review us wherever you listen. It helps others find the show. If you have any questions or have a story you'd like to share, you can contact us using our email account at firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. If you'd like to support the show, consider becoming a Patreon at patreon.com/cosmicsponge, where you get access to exclusive content, including our Weird Wonders, news, and stories released every week. To explore everything Cosmic Sponge has to offer, including other ways to support the show, head on over to our website at www.cosmicsponge.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.